Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And it's banned
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. And today, even though we were like, oh, we're not going to do movies we don't like or that we feel everyone doesn't like, kind of like Constantine, I feel like it would be weird if we missed this grouping of movies, which is the Fantastic Four movies. You saw the title. We're doing the three, like the Tim Story ones and the Josh Trank one, because those actually were released in wide release, and because otherwise we wouldn't talk about Fantastic Four, and it seems like a very weird omission. So we're gonna try our best with that.
Yeah. The idea there was to, because if we were to, I feel if we were to break each movie down into individual episodes, we would just be harking on them, and I think that's not the spirit that we want to do. I think the spirit that we want to do is celebrate what worked well with each film, where the shortcomings were, and what we're hopeful for in the future, because we know that Marvel will be introducing the Fantastic Four in the future, and what the MCU could learn from this, despite the fact that they've already got something in the works that they've learned about this. Obviously, it is Kevin Feige, and he's got like plans for the next 100,000 years of whatever. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We're grouping them all together.
And also because we did do somewhat of a Fantastic Four Josh Trank episode. Like I'd seen it, you hadn't seen it. Then we did an episode where you had seen it. So we've done it, but I just feel like as a whole, I think there's something I feel about Fantastic Four in general, which is why we're grouping all three movies together and not just doing the Tim Story ones. Anyway, first movie,
the 2005 film, Tim Story. Yep, directed it.
Important for me, it is a black director. I find that interesting. Because I remember when the movie first came out, I'm like, oh, people just don't like it because it's a black director. And I mean, probably not, but also I don't think that helped the movie. I do think that it's nice that he got like such a big look in terms of like, as we're saying, like people love Fantastic Four, not necessarily me, but they are a beloved group of characters.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he was trusted with that speaks well to like how he operated in Hollywood at that time. Like,
correct.
That's really cool. I can never take that away from him. He got two of them.
Yeah, and there was a lot of trust in him in this franchise.
I mean, it does sound like he was kind of shitty to Jessica Alba as I read things, but so there's that. But yeah, I think that was cool. I mean, who knows what the deal was? Maybe it was like, you don't really have any say. You're just going to do what we want. But it's still nice that it was like Tim Story gets to do the first two Fantastic Four movies. In terms of casting, sure, Ian Griffith is good. I mean, I feel like everyone likes Michael Chiklis as the Thing. Like that was really well done.
We like Michael Chiklis. The Thing we'll talk about separately, but
all right. I'm saying that if you saw that on paper, you'd be like, "That's a good."
Yes, it's a good casting call. I enjoyed it. It was good. Yes. I see where they were going with his casting.
For all of the movies, I don't think anyone lives up to their potential, but I don't think that's on the actor. I think that's on the greater thing I wanted to talk about. But yeah,
right.
Chris Evans does a great job as Johnny Storm for what they want for this Johnny Storm.
Yes, fantastic job. Really enjoyed it.
Really cocky. And then there's the awkwardness of Jessica Alba, which is, I understand why she's cast.
Yes,
I feel bad. Like, she's very upfront about, like, she was told to act like she was in a comic book movie, which is kind of, I actually think is the strength of the first movie, is that they're like,
Mhm.
all right, we're just doing this like a fun comic book thing. Like it's
Yes.
not Batman Begins, it's not like even Superman, like that we talked about, where they're like, yes, this is a comic book property, but we are going to take this seriously and tell an enduring story. This was like, this is a cartoon, we're doing a big
Mhm.
cartoon, and I think that that's probably the best thing about this movie, is that
I agree.
they are having fun with it.
Yes, I
I
agree with that sentiment a lot because the first one is so much easier to watch than the second one. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be fascinated to see what your opinion is when we ultimately rank all three in
Yeah,
regards to watchability at the end of this. But to me, I think one of the funniest things about the first one is that it's so lighthearted in nature. It's so doesn't take itself seriously that you can really write it off as a really truly family friendly picture.
hmm
And it works in that sense because there's so much more you forgive because you mix that kind of movie watching element. You know how like a lot of fathers will watch Disney movies with their kids, and then they won't be so
hmm
critical with it. But if they watch a Batman movie with their kids, they may be a little bit more critical with it
yes, yeah,
because of the
depending on
fact
the
that
Batman movie. Yeah.
correct, right? So I feel like the Fantastic Four in this regard had that going for it for this one. It's lighthearted nature. Its goofiness worked well with everything
Yeah,
that
it's just a fun
everyone did.
time at the movies. I don't
Correct.
like it. Didn't necessarily work for me at
Yes.
when I saw it, even not even just rewatching it, just when I watched it. But again, that comes down to me not necessarily liking what people like about Fantastic Four, because all
Yes.
of that's in there. The whole like Reed is most likely just a big dick because
Hmm.
he's so into the science, and I'm like, right, but you're forcing us to be like, oh, he's this is this family, and I'm like, but that
Yeah.
I like, and he
Doesn't treat him
neglects
like
the
that,
woman he loves, and like he could
and he
not
bosses
really, he's
everyone
not
up.
that interested in. I do like that the movie is like, no, like he made this promise to Ben to fix him, and then they
Yes.
Doctor Doom kind of plays on like, well, he's mostly just using this as like a way to get back with Sue. He's not really helping. Like
Right.
that's good, but I'm like, is that like what I want to watch? Like I want to spend time with these characters.
Mhm.
And again, that's my fault. Like I just, it's not compelling to me in that way. So I
Agreed.
removing that from the equation,
Hmm.
I think that that aspect of Fantastic Four, the whole like it's a dysfunctional family, but they always get it done in the end.
Hmm.
That this movie does that well,
Hmm.
or at least I understand that that's what they took from the comics, is
Right.
that element.
Yeah.
I think that and so like they're taking the cartoonish elements, but they are like honing on this whole like it's because I remember the pitches before the movie came out was like it's going to be like a 60s sitcom, like that's what, and I'm like, yeah, I can see elements of that in there.
Mhm.
Like it's just fun, like they're, even though they have this amazing villain in Doctor Doom, and I don't mean the portrayal, I
Mhm.
just mean if you were to talk about the comics, that
Yes.
like even the fact that some people are like suggesting that maybe Doctor Doom is going to be the Thanos of like phase 4 and 5, like this overarching villain that could take on everybody, even though they
Mhm.
have him. What I understand about this first movie take is it's really their infighting that's the problem, not necessarily
Yeah.
whoever they, because as long as they're on the same page, they'll beat anybody, is
Correct.
this movie's idea,
Yeah.
I feel
And
like.
and it's not only I agree the biggest enemy is themselves, which I
Mhm.
do enjoy for the first film. If that was the intent and everything like that, mission accomplished. Yeah, you guys convinced me that the infighting was more toxic and problematic than Doctor Doom ever was.
Yeah.
However, the issue with it is that it doesn't, to me, successfully do a good job of actually establishing them as a dysfunctional family prior to those scenes, right?
Oh, because they're not a family, they're like,
Exactly.
it's like
It's so
Reed
disjointed.
and Ben,
Yes.
and then
And then
Sue and Johnny, and it's like, oh, like I remember I texted my sister because there was this funny thing, because the summer this came out, it was Batman Begins, then Fantastic Four, and I saw Batman Begins with my sister,
Mhm.
and she likes Fantastic Four, and she's like, oh no, She was like, I hope Fantastic Four can be as good. And I'm like, you know, it won't be. Like, there's no chance Fantastic Four is going to be as good as this movie we just watched.
Right.
And so, like, I texted her and I was like, I'm rewatching Fantastic Four and I'm already pissed off they're not already together. The fact that they're disjointed this late into it,
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't like, because it's exactly what you said. You need to feel like the powers exacerbated something that was already happening within their
Yes.
dynamics,
Mhm.
and not just like, well, they're together now, I guess, and that's
Exactly. So,
what's
like,
upsetting things.
yeah, like one of the things I would have liked to see is, for example, Johnny Storm picking on Michael Chiklis beforehand, and now he's just adding rock jokes to the mix, as opposed to like,
Well,
oh,
I mean, they do have that, but it's like one scene right before they get in the
exactly. It's just like a
spaceship.
one. It's like, oh right, we have to force something in here, and it's just like a small subtle thing. It's just, it doesn't do a good enough job of building up that unit prior to anything else, because you have Victor Von Doom, who's with Sue at that point in time, so he's completely disjointed with everything else.
And I feel like that's another thing they took from the
Yeah.
comics, which is, again, stuff I don't really like. It's like that there's this element of like, oh, Reed's constantly in like danger of losing his woman, and I'm like,
Mm.
like it's either Doom or it's Namor, and I'm like, I just don't like that
Yeah,
stuff.
because she's used as a tool in that
Yes, yeah,
story writing element, and I don't like that. She's not an independent person. It's not, and it's also, it makes her character to me very, very petty from the perspective of, like, to me, I'm never convinced that Sue and Victor actually have a romantic relationship. It's like but they force it anyways, and maybe that's Jessica Alba's performance or whatever it is, the writing or whatever it was. I'm never convinced that Alba actually doesn't like, Sue doesn't like Reed. I'm 100% convinced the entire time. I was like, oh, you're still hung up on him. You're actually just trying to
yeah, that's
date
on
that
purpose.
guy to piss him off, kind of deal. And that,
I think she even says, like, she's like, kind of like, why don't you ever notice me? Because that's her thing, is she's the invisible woman
yep,
because Reed doesn't see her. That's what makes her invisible, is Reed doesn't see her.
right.
Again, all stuff that, like, I assume is deeply steeped in the comics, but why I can't ever really get into Fantastic Four, because of when it was made. It's such a product of it. That
Yeah,
dynamic of like a man and a woman. Again, who knows what happens really in the 60s? We weren't born, but in
mhm.
terms of the media that comes out of that and the ethos that people kind of have about that
Yeah,
as the good old days, it's like a man was a man, a woman was a woman. They knew their place, and that all unfortunately plays into the Fantastic Four stuff, because
correct.
it's like she feels so powerless because Reed doesn't notice her. It doesn't really
Mhm.
matter what that she's. I feel like the first two movies are kind of like, she's probably smarter than him, and like, and she's a better functioning human being than he is,
Mhm.
but like, she's rendered completely like powerless because she's so hung up on whether or not he notices her.
Correct.
And I'm like, oh, okay,
It's
fine.
it to me. I feel like the issue with Reed in this one is that, and I have to tread lightly here. I don't mean to take any offense to anyone or anything like that, but I feel like the way they write his character would be so much more successful if there was an element of Asperger's, or like some sort of, if he was on the spectrum somehow.
Right.
And I would actually really, really enjoy that from the perspective of, let's bring that front and center to more people. Let's kind of show how these personality traits, these kind of things. Because this version of him is, he's 100% a human, like not on the spectrum. And then instead of, like, he just choosing to ignore Sue in many, many regards. It's like, oh, the science, and all this kind of stuff. Versus if someone was, for example, on the spectrum and was like, that was their thing. And then it's a story about telling how that relationship forms and the small, subtle things that mean a lot to her and all that kind of stuff. That to me would be a way better successful storytelling technique. And I think that throughout the first and the second one all the time. I'm like, if he had Asperger's, or if he was on the spectrum somehow, it would make it so much more interesting in many, many regards. Because his relationship with with Michael Chiklis' character, Ben
Ben
Grimm,
Grimm,
would
yeah.
be so much more meaningful too. It's just like you have like this thing that's you really feel for him, as opposed to like in this you're just kind of a dick, man. You never really learn from your mistakes. People are telling you what you're doing. People are like telling you that, hey, Sue's interested in you again. Like Ben tells him that multiple times, and it's so frustrating because it's just like, I do appreciate the fact that, well, she's with Victor right now and not being like that toxic kind of,
he's like, I'm genuinely happy for you, because
yes.
that tracks for me. He's like, well, I guess that makes sense. Like all the math adds up on that.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that, but the idea that Sue definitely wants him to have a jealous emotional reaction, an irrational one, to prove to her that he cares or whatever, is just, to me, I don't like that dynamic at all. It's like you said, it's speaking to a period of time where the 1960s was idolized, and I think when we talked about that in the Umbrella Academy podcast episode, where we're talking about the relationship between the wife and the husband, very, very, it resembles that kind of that ideology, that type of thinking of like, this is how it's supposed to be, and there's no deviation from this. And that's why, to me, it doesn't connect, because when this arrived in 2005, we're already beyond that era.
Yeah, I think, and at least the TV I grew up with, we'd moved away from that. So I think it's a harder sell for me anyway. That's, and again, I'm not trying to say that isn't something that Sue's character isn't supposed to have. Like, if it was like one of the story beats was that she was like upset that Reed didn't care about her, it's fine. But it just seems like she's defined by that. Like, if it doesn't, it feels like that's the whole point of her in the movie. Is like,
that's what I
notice me, and I'm like, I feel like she should have something else going on.
Correct.
Like, even the way they used like Hope, is it Hope Van Dyne in Ant-Man and not the Wasp, the first Ant-Man, is that she's got her own like espionage thing going because she's working for the enemy. And yes, I know it's a different dynamic between Hope and Scott Lang, but I do think that like she's got her own thing going, and whatever interaction she has with Scott are, layered with the like romantic tension, but that's a layer to her character. Like, she's just got her own thing going on, and I feel like they strip that away from. And I'm not even saying like that's the fault of this particular movie. I just feel like it's kind of, as I said, from what I know from the comics, and I'm sure there's stories that aren't like this, but like I feel like the things people reference all the time are like, if she's not just the strong woman who holds it all together for the family in the Fantastic Four, she's like potentially stepping out on Reed by going off with Namor or something. It's like, it's so like connected to like what she is or is not doing for Reed.
Yeah.
Instead of like having her own. And again, I don't read it, so I'm not saying there's no stories where Sue is just her own person. I'm pretty sure during Civil War, the stories are that she picks a side and Reed picks another side. Right. So you do have elements of like her being her own person.
Yeah. So I think we should clarify. Well, I need to clarify to the listeners right now. I am only familiar with this character in television format as well as movie format. The one we review, I have no knowledge about this character or this entire franchise from a print media standpoint. And that needs to be taken into consideration if there are, for example, and I'm 100% sure at this day and age, in 20
certainly now,
is gonna have very different story beats for all these characters, stuff that's very, very relevant. And of course, we're going to talk more about that when we get to the Josh Trank Fantastic Four. But this dynamic, very much like Spider-Man to me.
Oh, the Raimi Spider-Man.
The Raimi Spider-Man resembled an era of Americana that did not exist, and the movies did not reflect the time. And that's, to me, where this movie disconnects. It's still idolizing that 1960s, that the good old days, kind of like, the good old days where you're able to have a white picket fence, and unemployment was low, and all this kind of whatever people celebrate about that era. But that's, to me, what doesn't work a lot about this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, as we said, like, especially when you were saying, like, oh, if he was on the spectrum or better, I don't know that fits this movie, because, as we said, it's a cartoon and they're leaning into that. So then how delicately are they treating that if everything else around it is so buffoonish and off? Like, but given that we're like, okay, they're not trying to do any kind of deep character dives on this. It's the stock characters that you know from the comics. We're jumping in. I guess that's where it's like, okay, well, then we're just going to have a fun time with them, and hopefully they sort out their issues by the end, which they do. That only takes me so far, I guess. I can say that that's a strong point about the movie, is that it knows what it wants to accomplish. It's just, we haven't really talked about Doom yet, but like, if you've got Doom as, instead of like, which in the comics, I think the first villain was Mole Man or whatever, like that Mole Man seems like a better villain for this movie than Doom, because for me, like, if you're called Mole Man, you're probably not that big of a deal. And so, like, it's like, maybe you have that Victor Von Doom was on the ship, and then they're like, oh, we don't know where he is, and that's when he comes in for the second movie. But it was just kind of like, they really just, all they needed to do was knock over a fire hydrant and get him. Like, they got him real hot, then they got him real cold, and that was that. And it was like, and again, this movie isn't building towards some big showdown between the villain and the heroes. It's about them and the drama they have as a family. But like, but is that something I want to watch?
And that is definitely, I agree. Like, Mole Man would be a much better villain in the first one, because, well, just establish Doom in this one, but like, make Mole Man the final showdown or whatever, and then have him be a bigger feature in the second one or whatever it is. But it's just, it doesn't work, because when you put such a powerful character like Doctor Doom and give him such a weak role in the final showdown, or the overall grand scheme of the Fantastic Four series that Tim Story did, it's really, really disappointing. He gets really sidelined, and I don't enjoy that at all. If they were, and I guess we're bleeding into the second one when we talk about this, if they were to establish exactly that, where he was established in the first one, Mole Man was the real, or the more immediate threat, and then the second one was more about Doctor Doom and all that kind of stuff, and they omitted the Silver Surfer and the Galactus stuff, and then brought the Silver Surfer Galactus stuff into the third, that would have been a way better franchise. It would have been more cohesive to me. But it's just, this is I didn't appreciate it.
All right, let's talk about the second one. It's the old Silver Surfer.
The Rise of the Silver Surfer.
He comes in, and he's like, oh, look, we're gonna kill you guys. It's happening. So shut up about it. And then he's like, but wait, Sue, you look like my loved one. Let me think about this.
And you raised some interesting points that I never considered.
Sue's just like, but what if you don't kill us? And he's like, all right, I'll think about it. And then Dr. Doom steals his surfboard. Which apparently in the comics, that's not how it works. He is not, the powers are not connected to his board. It makes things simpler. It makes things simpler to just be like, it's connected to the board.
At that point, I just suspended it, because I was like, in the comics, Galactus gives the being the power, so it's not connected to the board whatsoever. The board is just there to help him transport.
I mean, I guess if you're insisting on having Doom back, which why would you not bring him back? Then just have that be the MacGuffin. Like, oh, I need to get a surfboard. That's better.
But I mean, in all fairness, the visuals of it was really really cool. I did enjoy that. I just suspended all thought. I was like, oh, this looks cool. Doctor Doom on a surfboard. This is
Yeah.
so much fun. I like it.
Let's see. What goes? Oh yeah, and then Johnny can have all their powers. He's like Rogue, but like, I mean, he is supposed to be the Super Skrull. That was what they were going after. That he can just take on all the powers at once. He doesn't have to just flip between them.
Yep.
And that's how they win at the end.
Yeah, it's all about Johnny.
Like, yeah, it's a weird reversal of the first movie where it's like, let's all work together. He's like, no, just let me do it. I can do it. It's me.
Yeah, it's like
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that's a Fantastic Four storyline. Like,
it also seems really weak considering the fact that it's like, hey, this is the situation where you can touch us and take our powers right now. Let's let you come along on every kind of adventure via wild card, as opposed to isolating you.
Yeah.
And knowing full well that there's 3 other people with superpowers that can do stuff as well.
I think his name is Andre Brower. He's from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's Captain Holt.
Oh yeah, Andre
Apparently he legitimately loves Fantastic, because I remember being like, does he want to be in this, or is this like a paycheck?
Yeah.
And this wasn't based on his performance. It's like that's the performance you'd want from him. I was just like, I wonder, and then I read, I'm like, oh no, like he was like willing to take a pay cut for this. Like he's like, no, I just want to be in a Fantastic Four movie. I'm like, that's nice. I'm glad someone got something out of this. Like that's nice. I'm glad and same with Lawrence Fishburne, because I think he was cast as Galactus, and then they made the decision like, let's not get into the Galactus stuff. He doesn't talk. And then Doug Jones gets fucked again, and Lawrence Fishburne takes over the voice of Silver Surfer.
Yep. Man, have we ever heard Doug Jones's actual voice?
You will when you watch. I mean, I have, because I watch the Star Trek show, but it's his voice in Hellboy 2, which we're gonna do at some point.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good. Yeah, he gets screwed over again. Oh God, what works well for you in this one?
The beginning, I guess. I don't know. I don't even remember the beginning. Because I remember being like, this movie sucks. I do not like it. It's good. And then rewatching, I was like, nah, it's not that bad. And then it hit that point where I'm like, oh yeah, I don't care. I guess that beginning chase where like Johnny is chasing the Silver Surfer, I'm like, this is fun, I guess. And I think there was an element of like, at least this time it's not so much like, oh, it's just the drama of the family. There is that because they're trying to get married, but it's like, oh, this time they're gonna do a mission. Like they're being brought in to fix the Silver Surfer problem. I'm like, cool, I guess. And at least this is a more immediate thing that needs to happen.
Yeah, I think there's so much about this movie that I did not enjoy or appreciate.
I don't like it. It's not for me, but at least like in the effort of trying to say something positive, I'm like, it seems like a more focused movie. The chase scene was cool, I guess. I don't know.
And Andre Braugher was definitely, I really enjoyed him in this, because I was like just thinking about Brooklyn Nine-Nine at this point in time, and not really thinking about Fantastic Four related stuff. But it's really cool to hear that he really wanted to be a part of this and in this.
Yeah.
That was fun. It doesn't look like we're going to have a lot of positive things to say.
We forgot to bring up Kerry Washington in the first movie, and she's in this movie too. I mean, I'm happy. Like, that's cool that she was in it, because usually I feel like that character is white.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Usually that character is white. The blind woman who likes the Thing for who he is. I'm like, oh, that's nice that Kerry Washington got to do that.
Yeah.
In 2 movies.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a Tim Story connection. Doesn't matter though. I'm just happy that she was in these movies. It was something to look forward to in the first movie.
Yeah.
Because I definitely feel like she's a more interesting character in the first movie, and then the second one is kind of like, yeah, she's still here.
Yeah, it's and that's the unfortunate issue with that character who, no matter who plays it or whatever, is that it's just like the story arc is always going to be, I find you as a person interesting, and I don't care what you look like. And then you're stuck with a character that has no superpowers in a superpower story. So it ends up being either protecting you, or you're in the way, or something like that. So
I don't think she's ever in the way in these
she's
movies.
never in the way, but I mean, if she was integrated more, is what I say. So here she's just like, it's just, I like seeing her.
You could see her as like an Alfred. Like Alfred's not in the way in movies or anything.
No, he's not, but he's very essential.
What I'm saying. You can use her that way for the Thing.
Correct. I just feel like the way they made the Thing, I just don't. I feel bad for him because the prosthetics look so bad about it, but it's, oh God, I'm heavily conflicted about everything. I do think that Michael Chiklis's kind of performance is probably one of the better ones of everything, but it's just hard.
I think it's Chris Evans for me.
Well, Chris Evans is without a doubt the best.
Chris Evans is the person that like holds up for me.
Yeah, he's the one.
Michael Chiklis can get kind of like hokey. I feel like, and again, I understand that's what they're aiming for, but at least within these movies, I at least can hold on to, like, Chris Evans is the showboat that can't do it, and he's constantly looking. In the first movie, it's like, well, you're gonna lock me up after like I finally have like something to offer, and then in the second one, he's like, oh, like everyone's got love, like I should probably get on that as well. I mean, I think Ian Griffith is doing the best he can with how they want Reed Richards to be. And again, I'm not going to comment on Jessica Alba's performance beyond she even said she was constantly told, stop doing it that way. You're doing it too real. So like they weren't, and it's obvious every time they go to the well of like, oh, she goes invisible and she's naked. It's obvious what they wanted to do with that. Because I feel like if you watch a movie like Sin City, Jessica Alba can act. Like she is capable of way more than what they let her do in these Fantastic Four movies. So I'm not commenting on that because it is documented. People were put in place to stop her from being more than what she was in those movies. Yeah. I'm trying very hard not to talk about the Jessica Alba thing because I know they really, really screwed her over in this one. It's not reflective of her as an actress, but at the same time, I can't speak to many roles that I've seen her in where it's very compelling for me to say you have to watch this either. And I think Sin City is next. You'll see that she's.
Oh, Sin City! Yeah, you're right. That performance in Sin City, I really do enjoy her in that. I'm glad you brought that up.
And I think that's just a director that's like, oh, like, let's see what you can do, because that's the unfortunate thing about Hollywood is they cast women who look a certain way for very specific things. You really need to be, you just need a team around you that believes in you and fights for the roles that you deserve, as opposed to just like, I think Brie Larson has her YouTube channel out. By the time this comes out, this will be a very old thing, but like she talks about all the roles she went out for and like all the weird comments she was given and like feedback she was given. And it's like, she just waited it out. She was like, all right. I mean, yes, she worked obviously, but it was like, she learned what she wanted to do. And I feel like not everyone has that like privilege or like that ability to be like, I'm going to hold out for what I want.
Agree. I think there's certain, the way the industry was, I think there were
still
certain,
is.
Yes, still is. There were definitely actresses and actors that had more pull in certain things. Men used like this too, like, oh, we're gonna use you in this role. We're gonna use you in this role. I saw it in a long time in The Rock. I think it's definitely changed now. But different actors get used in different roles, and for Jessica Alba, she was definitely used for sex appeal,
yes,
as well as bringing a female audience, because that was one thing that Stacey is very, very good at reminding me from the the women's perspective is that she never would have watched Fantastic Four if it wasn't for Jessica Alba either. So whatever
Like
the
Jessica Alba in particular, or the character of Sue Storm.
Jessica Alba in particular. Just Jessica Alba. So
Fair enough.
I mean, there was definitely a demographic of people that this that was a successful marketing aspect for it. You know what I mean? But, like, that's undeniable. There was people that were either more interested in it because of her, or would watch it, that would paid for it, that would normally not have because of her. And that's undeniable. It's just a real shame that she's one of those actresses that really got shafted in her role in Hollywood, I think.
I agree.
But, yeah.
I think
I think she's so capable of so much more, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, I don't have anything really positive to say about the second Fantastic Four. I feel like,
I agree.
especially the like Japanese wedding at the end, I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah.
At least they're in Japan in that. Like, it's not quite like the Spider-Man thing where it's like, why is she dressed like that? It's like, okay, they're at least in Japan.
Oh,
Still
you're
a very
appropriation standpoint. Yeah. That makes sense. It's cultural. It's accurate. It's paying homage to it. I didn't take offense to it. I took more offense to the hair and makeup that they constantly did on Alba, and that's just because she doesn't work as a blonde. Her skin tone,
and like giving her the like piercing blue eyes in the second movie.
Yeah, those ridiculous blue eyes was just like,
I do not like that.
It's really hard for her to do anything with what they gave her or allowed her to do. So I really felt bad for her. The biggest, I think one of the biggest pieces of disappointment, and this should be no surprise to anyone that has watched this movie, is of course the treatment of Galactus as a character. The big black cloud thing is nonsense to me. And then the idea that they teased the helmet in the silhouette.
In the clouds, yeah.
In the clouds?
Or sorry, not the clouds, the shadows. You're right, the silhouette.
The shadow, yeah. I'm like, what? Because there's a point in time where you're like, okay, this is kind of cool if, like, for example, Johnny goes into the cloud and then Galactus is there sitting on a throne or something like that, and you find out, oh, that's just the way he moves between whatever, and it's the souls that keep the cloud moving or whatever, energize the cloud, and that's his way of taking over the universe or whatever. Like, that would have been cool, but like, no, they just like fumbled the whole thing, and I'm like, no.
I would say this. I think as people who know what Galactus is capable of, yeah, that sucks, but for who this movie is for, which is just a bunch of kids, they don't care.
Yes, I would say that.
I wouldn't say it's a fumble in that sense. I would say at best it's just like, oh, cool, they mentioned Galactus. And then, yes, there's the lunchback letdown where it's like, oh, you're not going to show him? But like, for the kids watching it, I feel like it's too much if you're like, Silver Surfer's there, and Doom is back, and it's still the same thing of like, the infighting between the Fantastic Four. Then you add Galactus. There's no like easy way of wrapping all that up. I do feel like it's kind of like they probably did make the right. Again, I'm not saying it's a good movie. I'm just saying, like, I feel like trying to like add Galactus into that as well would actually open them up to more criticism than it would if they just like cut their losses and they're like, all right, we'll show them the silhouette. Because like nothing about this movie makes me feel like I was going to be happy with a Galactus that they came up with. Like, look at how they treat, like, they put all their effort into Silver Surfer. I feel like he's the only character of the new stuff that, like, it seems like they respect him. Like, it's like he's not a goof. He's not like, it's like, he's got the powers. He looks cool. He sounds cool. They respect him. And I feel like that's where they put their energy. I don't really feel like, because I guess what I'm saying is the way they treat Doctor Doom as like the actual big villain, I feel like it's going to be the same energy for Galactus. I don't think they're going to like step it up for Galactus. And I feel like, yeah, maybe it was the right decision, and strictly in like mitigating more like issues for themselves, just cut your losses and be like, show them the silhouette. People who know will get it. and that's going to have to be enough for them.
I see your point there. The movie is overall so disappointing that if they had put a Galactus there, the only saving grace would have been like the costume was really cool, because it would have been a third act character that would have shown up for one thing, and then the secret to success at that point, the key to success, or like the Johnny having all four powers at the same time. That was their move, and you can definitely see that happening throughout the whole movie. So it's a very straightforward movie that was just, it didn't have a lot of life in it. There was
I do know people who like it more than the first one, and
really?
I think it's that shift I mentioned, is that this time they're on a mission. So I can see people who are just like, I just want action, being happy that we're not sitting around and watching like Johnny prank Ben a bunch of times.
That's
and
fair.
Maybe they're just like, oh, okay, yeah, like I see what the end game is, and we're gonna move towards that, and great. Like, this is where it moves better for me. I don't like it better. I'm just saying I do know people who like it better, and I understand. This rewatch made me be like, I can see if you're not invested in the characters, and it's just like, if I have to sit here and watch something, I'd rather watch this than the family sitcom drama type thing in the first movie.
Okay, that's a fair. I understand that logic very well. That makes sense to me. That tracks.
All right, here we go with the movie I think has the most potential.
Yes,
and
I cannot.
The more I read, the more I read about it, the more I'm like, oh, okay. It's the Justice League just 2 years earlier.
Yes, oh god, that is so accurate. I cannot agree with you more. Everything about this movie had such good potential, and
like I would say, like, even this Josh Trank movie and the second movie, I'm like, they don't really go to a bunch of different places. Like, it is like pretty much just out of the facility, just like, because I feel like that was my main concern the first time I watched the Josh Trank one, was like, they just never leave that building. Like, it's all in and around that building. And yes, they go to the other dimension, but like, in terms of like what you would think of based on the other movies, you'd think there'd be something where they're like in a city and like interacting with people, but they don't interact with anyone. It's like the lab people and then them, and you're just, it feels so claustrophobic. But what I like about the Josh Trank movies beginning is, and everyone got mad at them, like, oh, they didn't even read the comics. I'm like, yeah, like, they want to create something new for a new generation, and this felt like a genuine attempt at creating something new for a new generation, so you can get rid of all the like awkward 60s stuff.
Yes.
And like, yes, they're not together at the beginning of this movie, but that's because they start with kids. And you actually see them build up, and I'm like, this is great world building. Like, in terms of me being, again, it doesn't deliver on the potential, but like the world building, I still maintain is great in terms of me feeling like I would watch more adventures with these characters. I don't really care that they're not like the comic book, which they're not, but like, it's still these four characters that, like, if things were done properly, you could have like thoroughly invested in.
Yes,
as opposed
the world building is by far the strongest element of this movie. It is so good to see. First of all, Reed and Ben.
Like, that's a true friendship.
That's a true, genuine friendship, and you really feel for Ben in this one. You really feel for him so much more, because he's getting bullied at home, he's getting abused at home, he's not smart at school, Reed's bringing him along and all this kind of stuff, and like, they're both brought to a point where Ben is fully aware, is like, this is not my world, he has to leave, and it's just the pain of Ben turning into the Thing in this one is so much better.
And I genuinely like the moment where he's like, I'm not going without Ben. Like, this was a thing that we were going to always do together. Like, that feels, because I remember a lot of the criticism was like, what? They just get drunk and go. I'm like, that movie built up to that moment. The whole thing was like, we're here, and you have promised us that we, as the people who have created this technology, that we will take the trip. And then that gets ripped away from them. And I'm like, I get that they'd be, especially since you're skewing them young, like they're probably in their
Yes.
20s. It's like, yeah, I can see them like getting drunk and being like, dude, we already know what we're doing. Let's just go and do it.
Yeah.
And then that makes sense to me. And I feel like then the movie loses it because it's like that different dimension needs to turn into Latveria after that.
Yeah.
Not just stay the other dimension that he was in for a bunch of time. Like how Janet Van Dyne was in like the negative zone for Marvel or
Right.
whatever, like Quantum Zone, I guess, in
Quantum,
MCU.
yeah.
But like it needed to be like that's how you do it. Like it's not that he's in a different country or whatever.
Yeah.
It is like, okay, he creates his own, because then by the time the four come back in there, that's when you can have the Doom bots and all that stuff and like make it like this interesting final battle instead of like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I guess we'll work together and knock them out. I don't know.
Yeah, because Doom is like, oh, you had to come back to my world and all this kind of stuff. Like that was really, really interesting. However, it doesn't convince me. I'm like, you haven't really built anything from this.
Well,
You know, with the
I don't know what they were doing with Doctor Doom in this movie. Like it
Right.
was just kind of like, and I mean Doctor Doom. Like I know his first name was Victor Domashev, and then everyone got mad. So then when you watch the movie, you never actually see his name written down. It's always just extra dialogue saying Von Doom. But
Yeah.
like, I was like, I liked that approach of like he's this angry hacker or whatever.
Yes.
Victor Domashev, because yeah, Von Doom is a pretty telling name. Like I like that they were kind of just layering it in there.
Mm.
But but once he goes into the thing, it's kind of like, yeah, that was just shitty luck for him, and he didn't really do anything.
Right.
Again, he's alone, he's isolated, so it makes sense. But it's kind of like, I don't know, like maybe build his character up more on the other end, where it's like, now that I'm finally left to my own devices and I don't have to worry about society's thing. If you are doing the whole angry hacker thing, like now I can build the world in my image and like do something like that instead of just like, yeah, we just don't talk about him until we see him again.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, Victor.
It's
sucks for you.
Crazy. It like the Von Doom thing to me was just like, what the hell happened there? Because they completely omit him for like the middle act, and the third act is what it is. But the idea of like, I would understand his motivation so much more of revenge if he had built something really, really fantastic. Like in a lot of the animated Spider-Man stuff with Victor Von Doom, when he was shown and all that kind of stuff, Latveria was like a thriving oasis where people had like all these different things, and Von Doom was doing good in particularly for those people, and he was celebrated. He was like really, really good and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, the presence of the heroes brings a threat, so you understand his motivation so much more in that one. In this, you're like, what are you defending right now? It just seems like you have a rock to yourself and you've been isolated. What I would have liked to see is like apartment buildings or like physical structures that would like indicate to me that there was a society being built.
Yeah, but how would there be a society? There's like nothing there.
Well, that's what I mean.
It would have to be that he was like, and I know it's the Watchmen thing, but like that he was sucking in some of the more greater minds, and that's what leads whoever's overlooking the Fantastic Four to be like, we got to investigate this. Like people are disappearing, and we think they're coming into. Like then I feel like
that'd be cool if he was actually abducting people. I think that'd be really cool.
Because I think,
no, but what I mean is, it could have been something as simple as like, oh, my genetic material combined with the goo created these people, and it was my responsibility to take care of them, or something like that. If they did something like that, where it's like, oh, because I created life, I now have more empathy, and I've grown as a character, and your presence here saying you want to do research and all that kind of stuff. If it was a trick of like, oh, this seems like colonization or like an invasion from when I was a kid back in Latveria, or torn apart by like whatever war and all that kind of stuff, you would really, really, that character would be so much more. There's so much more depth to that character at that point.
I just feel like that he's not a villain. Like it is just him being like, hey, leave me alone. Like I wasn't bothering anyone.
Right.
You're in your version, and then I'm like, where do you go from there?
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, that's why the Mole Man thing, because we do know that Just Trank originally intended to.
Well, Tim Nelson Blake is that's the second Marvel villain that he was teased as being and then just never got to be, because in the Edward Norton Hulk, he's the leader, and then they just never use him. And in this one, he is Mole Man, but then they just kill him, and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's weird. What an interesting choice. And they just completely like skirt around all the missions that the Thing does in different places. You're just kind of like, okay, so we're just, and like I even liked the way it was more like body horror when they get their stuff. I'm like, yeah, they like this seems like they've got an in on this movie,
Yeah.
which was interesting, and I would have liked to go with it, and then people shut it down.
Yeah,
And like it's weird because, and I guess I shouldn't think it's that weird again, because before the movie came out, he was doing this 4-part series with Kevin Smith, and he was talking about what a great working relationship he had with Simon Kinberg, because everyone was like, oh, but isn't he just coming in to ruin everything you wanted to do? He's like, no, like it's so good. He's like, and I guess I just was like, I don't know, like why I wouldn't go out of my way to like compliment him if he was doing what apparently he did do, which is like neuter the whole movie.
Yeah.
And it's also why when people are like, oh great, Simon Kinberg's doing Dark Phoenix, I was like, I don't know. I don't know about that. And then we saw Dark Phoenix, and it's like I don't think it's a horrible movie, but it's not. It like it's a pretty neutered movie.
It's
And I'm like, oh, yeah, like I don't really know that I'm a big Simon Kinberg fan.
Yeah.
And like obviously the week that it came out, he was supposed to do it, but then he didn't show up. And Kevin's like, stop like tweeting me, stop emailing me. I think it's clear he's not coming back to do the 4th installment of this show. But yeah, I found that weird that it was like, I guess that's considering he had his own fault in it in terms of destroying the set and acting erratic and fighting with the actors, like specifically fighting with Miles Teller, even though he fought to have Miles Teller there. He didn't want Kate Mara, so he was mean to her. Watch out if you're cast as Sue Storm. Directors are coming for you. But yeah, like it's just one of those things where I'm like, he was shitty too.
Yeah.
But like it's also true that they took the movie away from like not even in a like all right, you filmed everything, we're done. It's more like it feels like it was like he had a script and like no, we're rewriting this.
Yeah.
And then they locked him out of the editing room and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like
Trank in this is because you can't discuss this movie without discussing Trank's role in all this and how his behavior was on set. And yes, it was 100% unprofessional. 100%. However, in that context where you're not fired, you're just
being replaced.
You're being replaced, and it's happening in front of you, and you have no say about it.
He was dealing with like just anxiety because
he was
getting I mean, it's a big step up from Chronicle 1,
right.
But and 2, all the death threats for casting a black Johnny Storm. He was like, no, like I had guns like all over my apartment. Like I like it. Yeah,
he snapped. He had a mental breakdown.
It was too much for him. Yeah, it was too much for him.
I felt really bad for him, and I felt even worse for the way the studio handled it, because you can really empathize with what Trank, what Trank's fallout from this all is, because look at what he did do. The potential for what could have been an amazing Fantastic Four franchise is actually all there. The blueprint, you see it. You're like, oh my God, this is really, really good. And then you read about reports about what he wanted to do, and you're like, holy crap, that would have been even better. And not even to mention the fact that visually, they look so much better. I love the reveal element of like, oh, these are our powers, and they're like that horror element. We're like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Like it's crazy because the thing about the first one was like, oh, they find out they have the powers, and they're not freaking out the way normal people would, in my opinion. They're just kind of like, this is neat. I can stretch my thumb a lot further than normal. But like he's just like horrified that his arms are like that. And then I think the other thing that's really, really cool about this one too is it shows me a different power or a different use of Reed Richards' powers that I don't think anyone had ever seen
Oh,
before.
being able to like shapeshift his face.
Yeah, when he was able to shapeshift
Mhm.
his face and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, whoa, that's really, really cool. I never even considered the fact that he could do that.
The only thing that did for me though was like, if you can do that, why do you keep the scars on your face? Why wouldn't you smooth that out? Your face. I get it. They made it. They paid attention and gave the kid playing him the same scars, so that you're like, those aren't battle scars. That's just there for him. So he's obviously not going to put effort into doing that if he doesn't have to. But I was just like, it just seems like that is something you could fix. But yeah, I would say of everyone cast, I'm like, I don't know if Miles Teller is the Reed Richards everyone wants, but again, it's this group of 4 people that I'm like, I would still watch them. Like, I don't really like. Yeah, sure, they're called Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Ben Grimm, and Johnny Storm, but like, I would still watch these people like deal with stuff. And I do, and this time around, I was like, I just wish they had made Sue Storm black. Like, it's such a like, it's. I get it, and I get what he wanted to, what Josh Trank wanted to do. I don't think that he wanted to cast a white woman either. I think it was like, you get Michael B. Jordan, that's it. Yeah. And like, everyone's gonna lose their like, because I remember even in the like comment sections, oh, so what? Sue Storm's gonna be black too. I'm like, anytime there is a character that like people have grown up lusting after, how dare they be anything but white? Yes. And it's like, oh, that how am I supposed to think she's hot now if she's not white?
Yeah, like I just, it's oh god, it's crazy. It's
but like the whole like, I adopted her from Kosovo, and I'm like, that doesn't play into anything. I don't feel like that's anything. Like, I guess it's more like the adopted daughter comes off as more of a kid to Franklin Storm than his like flesh and blood, and maybe but like I'm like, that's a nice pivot, I guess, since you couldn't just cast a black woman to be Sue Storm.
What they did with Sue here was very enjoyable to me from that element. What they wrote about her was just like this kind of, okay, she's very independent, she does her own thing and all this kind of stuff. And
I love Sue way more, and Sue more in these than the Sim Story ones.
Exactly, fantastic. The fact that you have Reed, not actually just like, oh, they're not like old lovers or anything like that, but they have the best relationship because they're forced to work together on this the most. That is really, really cool. And then Ben, of course, leaving because that would not make sense for him to be at the Institute and all that kind of stuff. And then Johnny having a chip on his shoulder because I love that angle of Franklin Storm being more connected with Sue than his own actual son, his own flesh and bone son. And that being because you have talents that you're throwing away.
Yeah.
That's why, he's like, oh, and then for him to be like, I'm sorry, I can't be the son you want me to be. Like, there's so much about this young cast and those story beats that would work so incredibly well. So incredibly well. And I also like the idea that Johnny Storm in this one wouldn't be picking on Ben as much because of the fact that they're starting a new relationship. So it's just like,
they still pick on each other, or he still picks on Ben, but it's like, it's more like testing each other out because like they're just getting to know each other.
Like, oh, I'm being a childish asshole right now. Like, there's so many elements of this I'm really, really enjoying.
Because I like that he went at Victor more than he went at mostly because they had more scenes together. But I was just like, like when he was like, oh, you can't talk to him like that, he doesn't take instruction. He's like, yeah, especially from people who say he doesn't take instruction well. I'm like, yeah, fight him more. This is good. I like this.
It's so disappointing because when I rewatch this, I am upset about what could have been. And this could have been a really good movie. It really could have been.
I mean, it could have been better than what I do think that like there was potential. That's how I started out. This one felt like it had the most potential. It was actually trying to do something different, and I feel like the same way people, and I don't feel the same way about Ghostbusters, but I'm aware of its cultural impact. The same way people are like, oh, there was nothing like this before. Like, maybe not, but just investing in those 4 characters and the world they created, I get that. I understand how you can latch onto that at a young age and feel like, yes, like these are my guys. The same way I understood that this movie was setting up the same stuff of like, you're gonna just invest in these people and like, let's see where this goes from here.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I felt about the Power Rangers movie too. I'm like, they did a great job of making me invest in those 5 teenagers. Like I was
100%.
like, I would watch those people again.
Yep. 100%.
I wish they were in the suits earlier, but like in terms of like actually making it so that you care about them beyond the kicking and punching, that was well done. And I cared about these 4 characters.
Yep.
More than I've ever cared about a Fantastic Four team. And I do think it's because they kind of deviated from it. And it was like, you're just watching, and again, my age as well. Like I am aware that I'm older than the characters, not the actors.
Mm-hmm.
But like just that idea of like wanting to prove yourself and like just the time where I was in life. And I feel like that would work for kids as well of like, yeah, like you've got your own ideas. Because the one thing I was just like, what an asshole. Like Reed's teacher, played by Homer Simpson.
Yeah, we talked about him before.
Like, why is he such an like when he does this thing? It's like, this is a science fair, not a magic. I'm like, what he did is undeniably amazing.
Science.
Yeah, if you don't even want to call it science, which I don't know why. If you like, it's like, why would you still like disqualify him? Like, what he did is amazing.
Yeah.
That shows so much potential.
Yeah.
And you're just like, nah, I'm a teacher. Fuck you. Look.
And I think that's one of the things that sets the stage better to justify that drunken decision that
because they've been made fun of the whole time.
It's not only that, it's just like, hey, I know what it's like to listen to authority and the people in charge and all that kind of shit. And I love that element because it's just like, hey, that old school ideology of like, I know better than you, I'm older. And then the kids being like, no, you don't. I'm doing this shit. So how dare you, with your age above me, take something away? Because like, this is a thing where his first place prize, or whether or not he's going to win first place was debatable. Like in the context of that one scene, but whether or not his participation in the science fair was legitimized is the consideration here, and it wasn't. And just because someone was like, "Oh, this is a cheap parlor trick. This doesn't count as actual science. You need to make me a volcano with acids and bases instead." Like, it's not something like that. It's just like, oh, I'm doing something that's so advanced, and not even from that early scene where he first tried the teleporting machine in the garage with Ben. Like him doing this kind of, it just kind of builds on top, like it just builds and builds and builds. So to me, when they get to the point where the military is taking it away, it's just like, you know what? Yeah, let's protest. What are they going to do about it? Like, we were the first ones physically there. What are they going to do about it? They still get to run their missions. They still get to do whatever. But what are they going to do? We're the one. We just get to be the first people in history recorded down as being the people that step foot on this other planet. That's it.
I felt like the movie did a great job of building up to it's everything after that where I'm like, oh, things really fell apart. But I do feel like all of that stuff at the beginning, like overly mean teacher notwithstanding, like all of that stuff is building towards something, and I feel like it did a good job of it. It's just it seems like the studio was kind of like, man, can we just get on with this? Like, let's just be done. Like, and that comes through specifically in how they treated the Doctor Doom character. It's just kind of like, like, well, who cares? Just they're gonna beat him. It doesn't matter what he wants, what he's doing. It doesn't even really matter what he looks like. He's just gonna look like a garbage bag. Like, who cares? Let's just get on with it.
Right. Yeah, this movie had so much potential. It really did.
All right.
So, moving on to more positive discussions. What from these movies, what are our hopes and desires for the MCU one?
I do not care about Fantastic Four. This will be all you. I do not have any. Like, we did our episode where we casted Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
That is the extent to which I care.
Fair enough. You know what?
There's no like, oh, I hope they do this storyline, or I hope this happens. Like, I don't care, man. You made me care about Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm assuming it'll work with Fantastic Four. Whatever they do is fun. Yeah.
What I would like to say though is that And I think it really depends on the tone of the overall phase when they bring them in. Phase 4, right? Phase 5. What phase
Who
4?
knows at this point?
Yeah,
Everything's
but
shifted.
it's. I really hope they back off the humor for this. I really hope they do, because at this point in time, when they're joining the MCU at large, it's very very serious. I think Phase 1 was the opportunity to be really really funny. If they're being introduced like the Guardians, then funny could be definitely be a thing. But I'm really hoping that they take the opportunity to use this to tackle more modern day serious family issues that are connected to
Interesting.
more people, as opposed to the family issues that from the 1960s, and that everyone assumes like, oh, everyone deals with these kind of issues. It's like, let's not make that assumption anymore. Let's actually see what other kind of issues we can bring up, especially in this day and age, how that divides us or whatever, and then to bring it together toward the end. Because it would be very interesting to be like, oh, okay, well, maybe Sue and Johnny are separated politically, like they have different political ideologies or something like that. Because that's obviously right now, I imagine a lot of families are having a lot of disagreements in regards to politics. That could be something. And then for them to be like, you know what, differences aside, we have to come together and beat this common goal and all that kind of stuff. And you're my family. Like that would be kind of great as a message right now, I feel. But I mean, it's I don't know what I really want, because you're right. I don't care about this
No.
franchise as much as I care about what's going to happen in Spider-Man 3 and how what Spider-Man 3 is going to do when the
So
Sony
like,
falls apart. Like I care more about that than I care about Fantastic Four.
what I would say is this: if they are gonna commit to Fantastic, why wouldn't they? It's we're even doing an episode, even though like we don't feel that strong about it. It's obviously a property people care about. I don't know that people actually understand that it doesn't really lend itself to movies that well, because
Yeah.
even what you're talking about is like this serialized thing that's going to happen, like that works if you're like every week you're reading a new issue of Fantastic Four,
Right.
for it's a TV show. But for a movie, like I'm like, maybe it needs to be more like the Rise of the Silver Surfer, where it's just missions, and like they're going on these missions in outer space or different dimensions. Because like I like what I understand people like about the Fantastic Four, the Incredibles already did.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Yes.
family stuff, and like we already have the Incredibles.
You know what?
So
That's something that I had literally never even thought about, is that the Incredibles does succeed where the Fantastic Four doesn't. Um,
like it's the same company, like maybe just like you still have room to have those interpersonal stuff, but I do feel like it needs to be a bit more focused on like accomplishing these missions, as opposed to like trying to reset and be like, this is the first family of the Marvel universe. It's kind of, yeah, they are, but like
yeah, but it's
what are we
not
getting accomplished if that's what we're focusing on?
exactly. It's not a big deal, because to me, Guardians achieves that. Eternals is likely to achieve that. You have to assume that a group of beings that are immortal have to get along somehow.
Yeah.
Like it's and the Avengers themselves has
Yeah.
become a family in its own right, and that and what I was just speaking about, political disagreements with the Sokovia Awards, we had a movie about that, Civil War. So it's just like, it's really hard to see what the appeal is with the Fantastic Four, because there's so many things that the MCU has already done. To me, the Fantastic Four belongs because of the potential of storytelling that those characters intermixed with the other characters has. But as a solo unit, to me, I think it has to me, it has underdog status. It's going to be a film that's much, much harder to come on top of, even more than the Guardians, because there's expectation for it. I think a lot of people have expectations for this movie that's coming up, and a lot of people are getting really attached to it. And we haven't even had a casting announcement yet. It's one of those things, and we don't even know where it fits in within Phase 5 yet. So it's a very interesting thing. I'm hoping for, obviously, Marvel to do something different. They always will. They've proven that time and time again. So I'm really looking forward to what Marvel can do. But what I would say is I'm not excited about it, but I am interested in it.
All right. Let's not give actual like out of 10 ratings, but like
Correct.
what's the order for you?
The order?
Yeah, like what's worst to best?
Worst to best.
Yeah. Well, let's say least favorite to favorite.
Okay. Well, for me, it would be definitely Rise of Silver Surfer.
Yep.
Is number one least favorite. And then to me, it would be, for example, the first Fantastic Four movie with Tim's story, and then the Josh Trank Fantastic Four would actually be my number one.
Yep, that is my order as well. I'm glad we agreed on that.
Yeah.
It's I think before the rewatch, maybe I would have said I guess the first one's the best one, but
yes, before the rewatch, I definitely would have said that.
But I just feel like the Trank one has so much going for it.
Yeah.
I like the cast better, and I do like the deviation from what they wanted to do in those Tim Story movies. I'm glad those Tim Story movies exist, as I said, for the black director and even the representation in this. Like they made Franklin Storm such an important part of the Josh Trank movie. So it's not just the token black guy. It's like, no, there's like, it's Johnny joins in, but it's like Franklin is like the heart of that team until So I really appreciated that, and as I said, that was a movie where I'm like, yeah, they fumbled the ending on that, but I would watch more of that. I mean, we never will, but I would have watched more of that.
And to be fair, when you say they fumbled the ending, I really like the ending that they had. I mean, that final scene where they're trying to pick a name.
Oh, that, yeah.
That is
I don't even really like that.
I enjoyed that.
That seemed too Tim Story for me.
That's fair. Fair enough. Whatever.
I didn't like that, but I understood what they were getting for. All right, great, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. This was Spoiled Run. As we said at the beginning, we are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network. We also said that at the beginning. So please head to thatshelf.com. You'll see other great podcasts such as Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, No Budget Nightmares, what a great theme song, and more. And if you'd like to listen to older episodes, we are on tdfeverything.com/spoiledrun. You can also connect with us on Twitter at tdfspoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. And please get out there and share the word by rating, reviewing, and sharing with your friends on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, iHeartRadio. Please get the word out there and send us some comments and connect with us so we can keep the train going.
Yeah, and we can really explore, like I said before, what people love about Fantastic Four so much, because Daniel and I are not getting it. We're not. I think honestly, it's just not for us. It's like the Punisher. We have to just conclude that this is not for us.
Yeah.
I hope we're wrong,
but I do feel like it could be for me if done well. I just don't know what that is. It'd be mostly because I don't care, but it could be good. Just like I didn't think I was going to care about Guardians of the Galaxy, and now look at it.
Yeah, I feel like this could be very, very well done if it was a more grounded kind of storytelling kind of thing. Like, you know how Spider-Man is, it's there's a lot of heart in those movies and a lot of fun. Like, I think if the Fantastic Four had that same kind of tone where their serious beats are really, really, and emotional beats are really, really good, but you're actually having fun with them too. But they're also dealing with day-to-day struggles. I think that's going to be important because with like I've said multiple times.
This is where we disagree. I just want them to be out in different dimensions and dealing with that.
Okay.
I think that's what that's what kind of brings down the first two, is that they are trying to make them seem so pedestrian. I'm like, but they have such intense powers, and it's like, let's save the fire truck from going off the bridge. I know that's not what you're talking about, but I feel like it's the same problem with Doctor Doom. If you've got these like larger than life characters, why would they be dealing with data stuff?
No, what I mean is like how, for example, someone deals with puberty and like having a superhero power or something like that. Like it's just funny kind of thing. I don't know what I really want, but I just don't want.
Yeah, I think that's everybody. I don't think anyone knows what they want with Fantastic Four.
Yep.
What they want is just to read the comics, which are readily available to them.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
thank you very much for listening, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.